The sky changed color before the first ship appeared. It wasn't the deep orange of sunset, nor the pale white of lightning-lit clouds. It was green, a sickly, radioactive green that flickered as if the atmosphere itself had caught fire. The clouds rolled unnaturally, shifting in perfect symmetry, like something was stirring them from above. Then they arrived. 10 ships, each one larger than the International Space Station. Smooth, black hulls that drank in light. No windows, no markings, just shape and motion and silence. They came down slow, as if to savor the moment, as if the invasion had already succeeded, and this was just the ceremony. People watched from rooftops, roads, windows, phones in trembling hands. Then came the broadcast. It wasn't in any known language. Not sound, not speech. A pressure in the skull, like something ancient clawing at the back of your brain. Everyone felt it. Most dropped to their knees. Some bled from their noses. Then the silence returned, and Earth's power grids collapsed. Within a day, every major city was dark. Satellites blinked out. Communications severed. Defense systems fried. Aircraft fell from the sky mid-flight. The invaders did not fire weapons. They did not march troops. They simply disrupted the world's balance and waited. But they miscalculated something critical. They thought Earth's most dangerous force was its machines. They forgot the planet itself was alive. And humans. Humans had lived through every disaster Earth could throw at them. Floods, storms, fire, ice. They had learned to survive it. What the invaders didn't know was that humans had also learned to use it. In a facility buried beneath Mount Washington in New Hampshire, a group of scientists huddled around an offline server rig. The storm outside was brutal. Thunder shook the mountain. Sleet lashed the sides, and the temperature was dropping fast. They called it Base Zero, an old research site once used to study extreme weather patterns. Abandoned for nearly a decade. Reactivated 3 hours after the ships arrived. Among them was Dr. Mara Keene, a climatologist and physicist. She had spent years trying to simulate large-scale weather disruptions for the military, but her project was shelved. Too unstable, they said. Too unpredictable. Now it was the only thing left. We're not going to outgun them, Mara said, wiping sweat from her brow despite the cold. But we might be able to drown them. What are you suggesting? One technician asked. We make Earth fight for us. Reports trickled in through old hardwired stations. The ships had landed across all continents. Some hovered over oceans. Others floated above mountain ranges or deserts. None made physical contact with humans, but their presence disrupted the natural order. They pushed against the jet streams, disturbed cloud formation, caused massive fluctuations in magnetic fields. One satellite image showed a ship over the Amazon, and a cyclone forming just beneath it, the first ever recorded that far inland. They were triggering weather chaos without trying, which gave Mara an idea. What if we turn that chaos into a weapon? She pulled up old research data. Storms intensified through ionosphere manipulation. Thunderheads charged with directed radio frequencies. Fog banks pushed with sound cannons. Hailstorms seeded with metallic dust. Weather warfare had been theory. Now it was necessity. Within 24 hours, Mara and her team had retrofitted Base Zero into what she called the Tempest Core, a hub for manipulating local weather using satellite reflectors, ground-based emitters, and old atmospheric hacking drones stored in military archives. She sent a signal to one of the few satellites that still responded, a prototype mirror array in geostationary orbit. She angled it toward the incoming superstorm drifting across the Midwest and powered up the emitter. Lightning struck the base antenna so hard it melted half the tower, but the clouds obeyed. They thickened, they darkened, and then they moved. Not with the wind, but toward the alien ship hovering above Lake Michigan. From the surface, people watched in awe. The ship didn't move as the storm rolled in, didn't react to the thunder. But when the first bolt of amplified lightning struck its hull, it jerked, twitched like an animal in pain. Then the hail started. Massive chunks of ice, each supercooled and dense, falling in a pattern, thick around the ship, sparse elsewhere. The vessel's hull cracked under the pounding. Its surface flickered with green light. Then it drifted, not in control, pushed, shoved, dragged down into the lake. A moment later, it vanished beneath the surface. The storm passed, the clouds cleared, and people knew. Earth had just drawn first blood. Mara stood in the observation dome, hands shaking. "We can't stop them everywhere," she said, "but we can make every inch they try to take cost them. We can give Earth a voice." "What do we call it?" someone asked. She stared out at the clearing sky. "Call it Protocol Tempest." They thought the first strike was a fluke. The alien ship over Lake Michigan had vanished beneath the storm and water, yes, but it had not been destroyed, not entirely. Zephyrians, as the invaders would later be identified by decoded fragments of intercepted biosignals, saw weather as an inconvenience, not a threat. That changed in the following days, because storms began to follow them. At first, it looked like chaos. Tornadoes forming out of season. Ocean currents shifting unpredictably. Unseasonal snow in deserts. Winds howling from directions that made no meteorological sense. But when scientists across old military bases and hidden research stations began to connect, a picture started forming. Someone was pushing the storms, directing them, weaponizing them, and Earth was responding. On the salt plains of Namibia, a team of ex-military engineers activated a long-forgotten atmospheric manipulator built decades earlier during climate control experiments. It had never worked properly until now. Above them, one of the black alien obelisks hovered silently, absorbing solar radiation. Feeding, perhaps. But that afternoon, thick heat began to rise from the desert floor. Hotter than it should have been. Humidity followed. Then came a rumble. The engineers ran for shelter, and the sky broke. A freak thunderstorm exploded across the plain. Temperatures dropped by 30 degrees in under 5 minutes. Electrical discharge jumped horizontally across the air like fire crawling. The ship jolted midair as bolts ripped through it. Its surface peeled, black skin flaking away under raw terrestrial force. It didn't crash. It fled, burning, trailing smoke. It shot upward and vanished beyond the stratosphere. Namibia cheered, and the weather teams took note. Earth's atmosphere was unstable, but that was no longer a weakness. Across 5 continents, researchers coordinated in complete darkness, using old fiber optic lines, microwave relays, and buried physical networks the aliens had missed. Each team controlled a different branch of the Tempest Protocol. Echo Station in Argentina, masters of wind and air pressure control. Glacier Base in Alaska, blizzard engineering and cold front manipulation. Ash Ring in Indonesia, volcanic gas release and atmospheric ash diffusion. The Monsoon Choir in India, rainfall control using cloud seeding, old atmospheric drones, and an underground nuclear power station once meant to power a megacity. And at the center of it all was Base Zero, where Mara tracked and coordinated operations like the conductor of a symphony made of thunder and flood. The aliens began to react. They launched strikes, not lasers, not plasma, but dampening fields. They tried to calm the Earth. Using their massive ships, they emitted pulses meant to normalize wind patterns, level heat zones, restore equilibrium. They thought nature could be tamed with order, but they had not understood one simple thing. Earth had never been in balance. It had always thrived in chaos. The Zephyrians' damping fields did slow some systems. In Canada, their presence stopped 2 blizzards from forming. In the Indian Ocean, they calmed 2 typhoons. But that was when the Monsoon Choir flipped the equation. Rather than resist the calm, they embraced it. They waited. And then, at the exact moment the alien ship's dampening pulse reached peak output, they triggered every drone they had. They had seeded the air days before dust, silver iodide, even dry ice. The aliens had prevented rain, but the instant the field dropped to reload, all that vapor collapsed into one massive storm cell. A monsoon so heavy it brought mudslides down from hills that had not moved in centuries. The alien ship powered its engines to lift, but the air was too dense, the gravity too high. It hovered, struggled, then slammed into the hillside like a hammer striking steel. The impact left a crater large enough to be seen from space. There were no alien survivors. Back at Base Zero, Mara watched the world shift. One storm at a time. One system at a time. "This isn't about control anymore," she said to her team. "It's about adaptation. Earth is alive, and we've finally learned how to speak its language." "But the aliens are adapting too," said one technician, voice low. "They've started targeting the stations." She nodded. "They've gone from ignoring us to fearing us." "What do? We changed the tempo." The third phase of Tempest Protocol began in darkness. Literally. Operation Eclipse. It was designed to use volcanic ash, synthetic cloud walls, and mirrored satellites to blind the enemy's orbital sensors. The Zephyrians relied on high-spectrum observation, heat maps, magnetic flow, atmospheric density. So Earth smothered the sky. Ash plumes from staged eruptions across Pacific volcano lines. Massive fog banks generated using salt vapor and humidity blast zones. Entire cities were cloaked from space. And when the aliens finally came down to check, Earth struck again. With wind, with hail, with high-altitude balloons filled with corrosive gases, with heat pumps that turned rainfall into freezing sleet midair. Ships began to fall, not explode, just stop working. The weather entered their engines, cracked their plating, soaked their power cores, killed their thermal regulators. One by one, they dropped like birds with broken wings. But the war wasn't over. The aliens still controlled the high orbit. They still had drones, fast, precise, hard to track. And worse, they had started capturing humans. Not for slavery, for study. They wanted to know how this primitive species had learned to turn the sky against them. They wanted to dissect the minds behind the storm. So they began hunting scientists, meteorologists, climate engineers, anyone tied to old Earth atmospheric projects. Entire caravans disappeared overnight in Europe and Asia. And that was when Mara made the hardest decision of the war. She left Base Zero. She didn't go alone. A team of 6 traveled with her. Biologists, geologists, former Navy pilots. Their goal was not survival. It was rebirth. They moved west, toward Yellowstone, to awaken something ancient. Not a storm, not a weapon, but a rift in the earth itself. Something the aliens would never see coming. A geothermal fault line once thought too dangerous to disturb. But if they could tap into it, push it, guide it, they could create something no ship could endure. The greatest storm Earth had ever made. A weapon born not from metal, but from magma. And it would change the war forever. Yellowstone had always been called a supervolcano, but no one had ever tried to wake it. Until now. Mara Keene and her team stood at the edge of a geothermal vent hidden deep within the restricted zones of the old national park. The ground was warm beneath their boots. Steam hissed from fractures. The air smelled like sulfur and history. They had one goal: stir the earth, unleash the sky, turn the land itself into a storm. The aliens would not expect it. Their models were built on pattern recognition. Their sensors mapped electromagnetic pulses, but Yellowstone was too complex to scan accurately. The region's magnetic field scrambled even human satellites, and deep beneath it all slept pressure chambers the size of small countries. Mara had once studied them from afar. Now she was here, not as a scientist, but as an architect of Earth's rage. "This is no longer climate science," said Darius, the team's geothermal expert. "This is controlled eruption engineering." "There's no such thing," Mara replied. "Until now. The plan was dangerous. It involved channeling thermal buildup and volcanic gas release in sync with the global tempest grid. That meant syncing Yellowstone with the network of drones, satellites, and atmosphere jammers they had scattered across the planet. It was like turning a lightning rod into a gun, but instead of electricity, they would be firing pressure waves and ash, not to destroy Earth's ecosystem, but to use its natural power in a focused blast, one that would reach the edge of space, one that would bring down anything flying above it. Preparation took 3 days. During that time, the skies above remained quiet, too quiet. The Zephyrians were watching, from orbit, from high-altitude drones, from the edge of human perception. But they did not strike. They waited, perhaps curious, perhaps afraid, perhaps still believing that humans would destroy themselves before succeeding. On the fourth day, the ground began to shake. Not a quake. Not yet. Just a tremor. A heartbeat. The giant was waking. Darius monitored the steam vents. We're getting rapid buildup. The pressure's climbing faster than forecast. Good, Mara said. The satellites are ready. The clouds are forming. All we need now is for the sky to listen. They launched atmospheric probes into the forming storm system above Wyoming. Clouds thickened unnaturally fast. Tempest grid pulses seeded them with ionized particles. Static grew. Lightning crackled in long forks. The wind began to howl, not wild, but shaped. Like a wall. A wall of storm meant to catch anything trying to escape. What would happen next? At midnight, they triggered the final signal. All around Yellowstone, the seismic dampeners were disabled. The crust was allowed to breathe. For the first time in recorded history, humans told the earth not to stay still, but to move. It obeyed. The explosion was not like a nuclear blast. It did not shine or burn. It rumbled. A sound older than speech. A force deeper than destruction. The earth opened slightly. Not enough to erupt. Not yet, but enough to release. From within the caldera came a vertical wave of hot gas, pressure, ash, and ionized particles. A tower of fire and sky. Straight up. 10 kilometers. 20. It punched through the storm system Mara had built and turned the sky into a weapon. In orbit, the Zephyrian sensor grid saw the blast too late. 5 ships hovered over North America. 3 directly above Yellowstone. None survived. They were not torn apart by physical matter. They were scorched from within. Their outer hulls boiled. Their internal systems shorted out. Their gravity engines buckled. They crashed like burning meteors. Not with impact, but with fear. Because the humans had reached beyond technology. They had spoken to the planet itself. And the planet had roared. In the following hours, the ash drifted east. But not in destruction. The team had calculated the release. The dust rose, but the rainfall they triggered to the north pulled it away from major cities. They had created a weapon without destroying the earth. And the message was clear. We control the storms. We are the thunder. We are not prey. Base Zero received the report in fragments. The Yellowstone weapon had worked. But the celebration was short. Because something had changed in orbit. The largest Zephyrian ship, long silent, had begun to descend. It hovered not over a city, not over a mountain, but over the ocean. Pacific depth, where no satellites could see. It pulsed with new energy. The planet trembled again, but not from Yellowstone. From something else. Something deeper. The aliens were adapting. Fighting back. Turning Earth's own oceanic systems into weapons. And now the next battle would not be in the skies. It would be underwater. Mara stared at the final satellite images before the feed was lost. The ocean surface had begun to whirl. A vortex large enough to pull ships under. A signal from the depths rising in frequency. They're making a storm of their own, Darius said. Let them, Mara whispered. We've learned from sky. Now we learn from the sea. The storm over the Pacific was not natural. Not even close. Satellite images captured before the last orbital sensor failed showed a swirl the size of a continent. Not a hurricane. A vortex. Spiraling from a single point deep beneath the ocean surface. The eye did not drift or wobble. It held steady. Anchored. At its center hovered the Zephyrians' command vessel. Bigger than anything they had deployed before. Glowing. Breathing. Feeding on the sea. Global temperatures began to shift within hours. Trade winds reversed. Ocean currents broke formation. Fish washed ashore on 3 continents. The weather stopped obeying Earth's patterns. It started obeying the Zephyrians. They were no longer just reacting to human resistance. They were trying to rewrite the planet itself. Make Earth something they could survive. Something they could control. But the humans were not done fighting. They had learned how to speak to the air. They had bent pressure and current. Now, they turned to the final element. Water. Base Delta lay beneath the waves, buried in a trench off the coast of Chile. Originally an undersea research lab studying tectonic movement, it had been converted into a hydrodynamic weapons platform in the earliest days of the invasion. A backup plan, a last resort. Now it was the front line, the only place left where Earth's defenders could strike back. From beneath, Captain Reyes took command. She was a naval engineer turned resistance fighter, cool under pressure, unflinching in crisis. She wore her wetsuit like armor, her eyes like ice. Reyes had one mission: find the source of the vortex, disrupt it, force the ocean to return to Earth's rhythm, and make the Zephyrians understand that even the depths were not safe from human reach. Her crew deployed sonar mines, not explosives, pulsars, devices designed to emit concentrated frequency bursts tuned to destabilize fluidic energy fields. They called them throats, because when activated, they made the ocean scream. The first wave of mines sank quietly into the darkness. They settled along the edge of the trench. Then Reyes gave the signal, and the sea howled. The water shifted, not violently, but with purpose. The vortex stuttered, lost momentum. For 10 minutes, the swirling eye broke its perfect pattern. It began to drift east. Not far, but far enough for the Tempest satellites to re-establish partial readings. The Zephyrian ship had a core. It extended downward into the ocean like a root system. Long metallic veins tapped into geothermal vents. They were harvesting Earth's heat, fueling the storm. If Reyes could cut those lines, choke the ship from below, the vortex would die. Divers launched in pairs. No torpedoes, no guns, just precision and nerve. They moved through the cold dark, guided by sonar and instinct. They found the lines, glowing tubes running from the ocean floor into the ship's body. Alien tech fused with rock, too strong to break with explosives, but vulnerable to temperature change. Reyes smiled, because they had one last weapon: hydrothermic cannons. Experimental tech designed to inject supercooled liquid nitrogen into deep-sea vents. Never tested in combat. Now they had one shot. They synchronized the charge. 12 divers across a 3-kilometer span. Each one aimed their cannon. Each one waited. Reyes gave the word. The sea turned white. Instantly, the water around the Zephyrian root system cracked with ice. Steam shot upward. The core lines buckled. The vortex shuddered. And then the ship made its first mistake. It surfaced. The massive black shape broke through the waves like a wounded animal. It roared, not with sound, but pressure. A pulse rippled through the water. Several divers were thrown. Some never resurfaced. But the ship had exposed itself. And waiting above was Earth's final sky-based weapon, the Cyclone Array. Positioned in orbit by surviving drones, the array had stored atmospheric energy for days. It needed a target. Now it had one. The pulse fired. A lightning bolt thicker than a tree. It struck the ship dead center. Again, and again, and again. The sky exploded with light, and the ocean boiled. The Zephyrian ship writhed, tried to flee, tried to dive, but the water rejected it. It spun, cracked, and then came apart. Pieces of it slammed into the sea. Others floated. Most simply vanished beneath the surface, sucked into the hole left by the collapsing vortex. The storm above unraveled. The sky cleared, and the oceans fell still. For the first time in weeks, Earth exhaled. Base Delta sent out the signal. Target neutralized. Vortex broken. Command vessel destroyed. The ocean reclaimed. At Base Zero, Mara Keen stood before the global map. Storms had calmed. Cloud patterns were returning. The atmosphere had stabilized. And there were no more alien ships in the sky. The invasion was over. But the cost was still being counted. Thousands lost. Cities drowned. Entire coastlines reshaped. But Earth remained. And so did humanity. Not because of strength. Not because of weapons. Because they had listened to the planet. Worked with it. Fought as it. Months passed. Reconstruction began. Cities underground. Farms beneath domes. Satellites were rebuilt. Networks reconnected. But the protocols remained. Storm towers on every continent. Oceanic sensors wired into defense grids. Weather stations linked not just to forecasters, but to soldiers. Tempest Protocol had become more than a weapon. It was a philosophy, a promise, that no matter who came next, Earth would be ready. And high in orbit, among the shattered remnants of alien metal, a single black box floated. Inside was a recording, not of a voice, not of a code, but of thunder, endless thunder, the sound of Earth fighting back and winning. The skies were blue again. That alone felt like a miracle. No swirling vortexes, no static clouds hiding alien ships, just open atmosphere and scattered winds, moving the way nature intended. It had taken over a year to stabilize the jet streams, another to repair the oceanic drift patterns. But Earth, battered and burned, had not only recovered, it had grown wiser, and so had its people. Marrakeen stood at the edge of a reconstructed outpost on the edge of the Greenland shelf, now known as Echo Summit. Below her stretched miles of ocean, calm and endless. A new orbital tower was being built behind her, its frame lined with weather-reactive coils and emergency satellite ejectors. "We built weapons out of storms," she said quietly, speaking into a recorder. "But what we really built was respect." The Zephyrian invasion had ended, but it left a deep scar, not in the land, but in the mind of humanity. Earth had learned that survival was not just resistance. It was partnership. It was listening to the land, sky, and sea, and working with them. For centuries, humans had tried to control nature, redirect it, suppress it, but the invasion had taught them the truth. Nature was not a tool. It was a comrade, a force to be protected, and, when necessary, fought with. In schools across continents, new classes were taught: planetary defense and atmosphere dynamics, tempest theory, oceanic combat systems. Children memorized the names of storms the way past generations memorized generals: Typhoon Sombra, the Monsoon Reversal, the Yellowstone Break, the Great Wind Wall of Echo Station. Each one a battle, each one a victory. Lyra Vorn, daughter of Elias Vorn, one of the first survivors of the Zephyrian Ice Siege, now ran a training facility in what used to be Antarctica. The continent had partially thawed during the global storm shift, revealing solid ground and vast lakes. Her school was built from volcanic stone, solar cloth, and reinforced geothermal tubing. No central power grid, no satellite connection, entirely self-contained. She taught her students the same way her father had survived: endure, adapt, use what the planet gives you, and never forget the sound of silence before the storm. Reyes returned to the sea. The wreckage of the Zephyrian Command ship still lay at the bottom of the Pacific, a black reef of twisted alien metal slowly being reclaimed by the ocean. She helped establish Blue Sector, a marine colony research station dedicated to understanding deep-sea survival. Her words were now etched into a plaque outside the underwater dome. "We used to fear the deep. Then we became it." Orbit was not empty anymore. Humanity had rebuilt its space presence, but different this time. Satellites carried no weapons. They carried weather beacons, storm signal reflectors, flash flood relays. Any future invader would not just face bullets. They would face lightning, floods, ice, gale force wind shaped by math and fury. Mara often found herself walking alone during dawn. The quiet reminded her of the nights in Base Zero, when no one knew if they would survive until morning. She would listen to the wind then. She still did now. But today it was different. It no longer howled with warning. It hummed with balance. Peace had returned, but not ignorance. Earth was watching, waiting, listening. There was still no sign of another invasion. But out beyond the solar system, probes drifted through dark space. They carried recordings of storms, of thunder, of a planet that roared back. A warning to anyone listening: this world is alive, and it does not stand alone. The final monument was not built in any capital. It stood on a cliff at the northernmost point of Old Canada. The stone was raw, the engraving simple. Tempest Protocol was never just a strategy. It was a truth. You do not conquer a storm. You weather it, and if you are wise, you make it your ally. Below the quote, carved into the rock by hand. Humanity endured. Earth fought back. We remember. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the thunder in your bones and the storm in your blood, then hit that like button and subscribe. Humanity doesn't just survive. We adapt, we fight, and when the sky falls, we rise. Drop a comment and tell us, if Earth was under siege again, what part of the planet would you weaponize? The wind, the sea, the ice, or something else entirely? This is just one tale in the tempest of human resilience. More stories are coming. The storm is far from over. Until next time, endure, adapt, and never forget. We are the storm.